Today, I'm honored to have a conversation with renowned music therapist, Dr. Concetta Tomaino. Dr. Tomaino is the executive director and co-founder of the Institute for Music and Neurological Function. She is internationally known for her research in the clinical applications of music in neurological rehabilitation. Nice to meet you.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for connecting.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I'm really eager to talk with you about music therapy and the role of music therapy. The thing that I really admire so much about you is that you so clearly explain the connection between music and medicine, like no one I've encountered.
Huh.
So I kind of like to start there if we could and just talk about a bit about the science behind the effectiveness of music as a therapy, specifically for a neurological rehabilitation.
Sure. Well, it's pretty broad and people are still studying it, so there's not one absolute answer. Of course, my interest in working with people with a variety of neurologic, challenges, um, really focuses on how the auditory system influences or stimulates areas of the brain that do complementary function. So whether it's the parallels between the shared networks between speech and singing, or
Mm,
shared networks between movement, initiation, and gait and balance and dance, um, those overlapping networks allow somebody who's maybe lost a connection in some way because of a disease or injury or whatever, being able to excite and organize, and reactivate those areas through auditory processing, of which music is.
what types of music therapy,
Sure. So
in your
so
experience, have been most effective, particularly with Parkinson's patients?
Sure. So the real basic one, the one that's been studied the most, and something I talked about before this was even a thing, um, is the use of rhythm to organize gait and
Mm,
initiation and to keep the flow of movement sustained for somebody who festinates or shuffles or may freeze at certain times. And
yeah.
so, from those early observations that Dr. Sachs Oliver and I did many, many years ago and studied, um, it's become almost I won't say universally used because I still know people living with PD who don't know about dance and the importance of movement
Yeah.
like that, moving to music. But the science has shown that the auditory system, that the beat, the pulse of the rhythm actually organizes the excitation of the auditory nerve's connection to the basal ganglia, substantia
Mm,
nigra, cerebellum, parts of the brain that help with initiation and sustained movement. So when a person is unable to self-generate that information, or there's a glitch between when
mm,
that communication gets passed and the person loses the ability to control it themselves, the auditory system, since it's working on the subcortical level, can sort of jumpstart those
interesting.
those areas into motion, which then frees up the individual to be able to move and walk. There's been some research too that in some of these areas, that even though the auditory system will excite these neurons, there is a change in perception of rhythm with some people living with Parkinson's, um, because of the dopamine changes. So I know from experience too, working with people, that some people just don't feel the beat anymore,
Mm,
because there's like a time delay in the
mm,
perception of that process. So um, you'll feel the beat someplace, but it may be off to like
yeah.
I'm hearing it. And so what I'll do is alternate where the pulse comes in, so it supports where the sort of I'll double introduce the pulse, so there's a way for the person to benefit from that. So that's been studied quite a bit. There's a type of music there, an advanced music therapy training called neurologic music therapy. And so in that practice, they use very specific um, uses of rhythm and tone and music to influence a very specific response. So the use of rhythm to help with gait is called rhythmic auditory stimulation, the RAS. So if you talk to physical therapists, even they've picked up some of the language, and so that's been very well studied. But also the scope of the movement and the nuance and the flow of the movement can be influenced by the range of the sound. So instead of just a very sort of stagnant type of walking, the grace at which somebody moves could be influenced by the melody or the contour of the melodic line. Because again, we habituate neurologically to these sounds and sort of do it without thinking about it. And then the other big piece in PD is when the person's voice starts to get very soft or the articulation isn't well understood. So there's communication challenges. And so we do a lot of work with humming and vocal areas because that could get stiff, and articulation to make sure the person is tapping on the syllables of the words, so the motor system is helping organize their speech, and it reinforces and strengthens their voice.
My experience is interesting because as a conductor, my interaction with music is physical. It's motion.
Yeah.
And I have discovered that the physical motion of starting something and having something at the right tempo is very, very difficult for me to achieve. The physical manifestation of tempo is something different than my perception of tempo.
And are you sure your perception is right? And
Yes,
I ask
100%.
that just
100%.
because even if you perceive it yourself, if you can, there's a test you can do, and I bet you can do it in an app, where you have to tap along with a beat, and it measures your time
Yeah,
accurately.
but see, that's that physical manifestation of beat is can be an issue for me. But
Right.
if I'm just listening, for example, in rehearsal to my students and playing, I can tell immediately when there are tempo issues.
Okay.
I guarantee you that my perception of listening to tempo and perception of tempo changes is different than my ability to manifest tempo and be sure that I'm correct. What's happening now that I'm super aware of this? We just did a concert cycle over the last month, and in rehearsal several times I stopped and said, "You know what? I'm not at the right tempo." I could recognize it after we got going.
Okay.
So I'm starting to tap in. I'm starting to connect those two parts of my brain, I think. The part of my brain, the basal ganglia or whatever is controlling my motion.
There's just a time delay.
There's the perception of time and there's the manifestation of time. And those two parts, they're not in the same place on my brain. They can't be.
Yeah, no, they are. It's just a time delay. But I'm wondering if you conducted with a click track,
Yeah.
if that would help with
Well,
the
I practice
execution.
what I do now, and I never had to do this before, but now I practice conducting when all the pieces I'm doing, and I practice it with a metronome, or I practice it with a recording that's at the tempos that I'm taking.
So that's good that you're doing that.
But there's this other thing, and with conductors and musicians that I've spoken to, they smile when I talk about this because they're like, I have experienced it too. And it is a phenomenon, which is I don't have the vocabulary, but I would call part of that aesthetic experience of the creation of the music, of the performer performing the music, where the music is responding to me. I'm not responding to the music, that I have had I'm talking miraculous effects. There are moments where the aesthetic experience and the connection with the music and my gesture and the relationship between those is so strong that I have lost all of my symptoms.
Yeah. So there's two things. One is that music therapy is very much, or good music therapy is very much about the aesthetic and in the moment transformative experience of creating and making music too. That's what the music therapist tries to
Yeah.
get the person to experience, because it's in those moments where self-monitoring and gets shut down. There's this whole neurologic process. It's when you're in the flow state or in
The
the
what? Oh, tell me about that.
flow state. So when you're skilled and your ability to be in the moment creating, and this has been studied with jazz musicians. So in that moment of improvisation and creating, the part of your brain that self-monitors and said, this is right, this is wrong, you're off, whatever, shuts down and allows for this higher level of experiential creativity to take place. And that happens with musicians, it happens with, artists when they're painting and whatever. But the other thing too is that even somebody with Parkinson's, once you're actively doing something, the longer you do it, the less that hiccup happens, and that delay or whatever. So if you're totally ingrained in those moments, you should have many more of those periods where everything all flows together and seems to work. I guess the challenge is how to enhance those for you so you don't have those off times,
I'm not crazy, and there's a science behind what I'm experiencing.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, one of the earliest music, well-known music therapists was Clive Robbins and Paul Nordoff. Paul Nordoff being a well-regarded composer who then dedicated his life to working with kids with special needs. And they had this model called creative music therapy because they worked with kids with minimal language who were developmentally delayed. And they found that when they got the kids to make music, to actually be in that experience of making music, it freed them up to speak, to move, to interact, to do everything that normalized them in a way that nobody thought possible. Creative music therapy, and it's really beautiful. And it's been updated and stuff, but that it's all about that. And even me, if I work with somebody with dementia, even for those people, in that midst of sharing music and being in the act of singing or whatever it is, even if they're improvising on the piano, but we're making it sound beautiful or whatever, that act of doing really it's then stimulates all the preserved or well organized areas of the brain that are still functioning. So you get this absolutely beautiful coherence of function that without that flow, without being in those moments, would never happen.
The act of doing. See, that's
Yeah.
the act of doing, meaning the creation of the music. For
Yeah.
example, dancing. Yeah, you're dancing, but you're dancing to the music. And I get that that's really a powerful experience, and I know that it's very effective. That's different than the experience of doing, meaning the act of creating.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to say that's it's just a different type of experience.
Yep.
Do you think there's a benefit for a non-musician to ever have the experience of the creation of music?
Absolutely. Very important.
It has been such a eye-opening. Again, like my relationship, my Parkinson's relationship to music is twofold. Part of it is the obstacle that I must overcome because of Parkinson's in order to make music. But then there's this negative effect of Parkinson's on music making. But then there's this incredible positive effect of music making on my Parkinson's symptoms.
Oh,
so I look at it from both directions.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And when you were talking about the neurological pathways of music, you talked about not just the rhythmic aspect, but like singing in a melodic aspect.
It's using the tonal aspects, so the right side dominant prosodic aspect of speech. When you do
What is that? Tell me about that, please.
so that's so when you emphasize a word, when you almost like Brechtstimme, you know, it's so Gregorian German Brechtstimme, toning, singing the words, not singing like a song, but intoning each of the words is actually now enhanced by a more dominant right side activity.
Interesting.
Even though it's not rhythmic per se, it does have ups and downs that have rhythmic elements to it. And that actually helps with the flow and enhancing volume and articulation.
In a couple of previous interviews, you did talk about kind of the emotional connection that, you know, the familiarity and the role that the effect of music making on the emotional
Right.
aspect. Could we talk about that? The importance or the influence, I guess, is the word I'm looking for. The influence of having an emotional connection with the music that you're either listening to, or in my case, the music that I am being part of the creation of as a performer.
Yeah, when you're emotionally connected to the music, there's also release of dopamine and serotonin, so it puts you in a different state of mind. Those emotional experiences also shut off a part of the brain, in the amygdala, that's your fight or flight mechanism. So if it's pleasurable and enjoyable, the impulse to stop or to hold back gets disconnected in favor of the part of your brain that's saying, this is wonderful, let's keep going. That gets enhanced.
It's like magic. Things just start to flow. And now that I'm learning to tap into that, you know, I'm getting there in almost every rehearsal. Like at the end of rehearsal, I'm way better off than I was at the beginning.
Yeah, well, that's the dopamine rush.
Yeah.
The enhanced thing. You know, there's people with PD who go cycling, who ride on a tandem bicycle.
Yeah.
They, you know, when they first get on the bike, they could barely walk. By the time they finish like a half an hour of riding, they could walk for the rest of the day without a problem.
Amazing.
So it's the same thing. It's just the flush of dopamine that gets excited when you're moving. So, you know, years ago, they when somebody was diagnosed with PD, the doctors, the neurologists would say, try to not move as much as possible. You're gonna, you know, use up all your dopamine and you won't be able to move. And now, you know, everybody knows it's completely the opposite. You know, the more you move, the better you are.
Thank you so much for
Sure.
spending time with me. I appreciate it very, very much.
Sure. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.